The circulatory system also includes the lymphatic system, which circulates lymph, but the terms circulatory system and cardiovascular system are commonly used interchangeably to describe blood circulation. The cardiovascular system consists of the heart, blood, and blood vessels. The heart is essentially a pump that moves blood through the vessels. It has two sides, each of which has two chambers. The best known function of the circulatory system is perhaps the transport of inhaled oxygen from the lungs to body's tissues and removal of carbon dioxide in the opposite direction to be exhaled. Basically, oxygen-poor blood from the body returns to the right side of the heart, where it is pumped to the lungs. In the lungs, blood picks up oxygen and releases carbon dioxide. Oxygen-rich blood then returns to the left side of the heart. This part of the system is called the pulmonary circuit. The left side of the heart pumps oxygen-rich blood to body's tissues, where it unloads oxygen and picks up carbon dioxide. The resulting deoxygenated blood again returns to the heart's right side to complete the cycle. This part is the systemic circuit. Because the heart's left side has to pump blood to the entire body, it has much thicker muscle than the right side. There are 4 valves which serve to ensure one-way blood flow through the heart. Oxygen-poor blood flows from right atrium to right ventricle to pulmonary arteries, while oxygen-rich blood moves from left atrium to left ventricle to the aorta. The heart is enclosed in a double-walled protective sac called the pericardium. The pericardial cavity contains a fluid which serves as a lubricant and allows the heart to contract and relax with minimum friction. The heart wall has 3 layers. The outer layer, epicardium, lines the pericardial cavity. The inner layer, endocardium, lines heart chambers and valves and is continuous with the endothelium of blood vessels. And the thick middle layer, myocardium, is the muscle tissue responsible for the beating of the heart. The contraction of the heart muscle is initiated by electrical impulses, known as action potentials. Unlike skeletal muscles, which have to be stimulated by the nervous system, the heart generates its own electrical stimulation. The impulses start from a small group of cells called the pacemaker cells, which constitute the cardiac conduction system. The primary pacemaker is the SA node. It initiates all heartbeats and controls heart rate. Apart from transporting gases, the blood also supplies body's tissues with nutrients and removes metabolic wastes. It receives nutrients from the digestive system, where digested substances are absorbed through the walls of the small intestine into the bloodstream. These substances are then passed through the liver to be screened for toxins before joining the general circulation. In tissues, nutrients are exchanged for wastes. Wastes are then filtered from the blood in the kidneys and removed in urine. The blood also carries hormones from endocrine glands to target organs and plays an important role in the body's immune defense. The blood has 2 main components: a clear extracellular fluid called plasma, and the so-called formed elements, which include red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. Red blood cells transport oxygen and carbon dioxide. White blood cells participate in various defense mechanisms against invading organisms, while the platelets are responsible for blood clotting, minimizing blood loss during an injury. The blood circulatory system is a closed loop, meaning the blood itself never leaves the vessels. Instead, substances diffuse through the walls of blood vessels to move to and from the surrounding tissues. Vessels that move blood away from the heart are called arteries, while those that bring blood back to the heart are veins. Arteries usually carry oxygenated blood, while veins carry deoxygenated blood. For pulmonary arteries and veins, however, the reverse is true. The usual blood flow is heart to large arteries, smaller arteries, then even smaller arteries called arterioles, then smallest blood vessels called capillaries, where the exchange of substances takes place. Blood then collects into small veins called venules, then to larger veins, and back to the heart. Arteries and veins essentially serve to conduct blood. Their walls consist of 3 layers. An outer layer of loose connective tissue serves to anchor the vessels to the surroundings. A middle layer of mostly smooth muscles allows the vessels to constrict or dilate, regulating blood flow. And an inner layer consisted of thin squamous endothelium, separated from outer layers by a basement membrane. In general, larger vessels have more connective tissue and smooth muscle. In addition, arteries have more muscles than veins because they carry blood away from the heart and must withstand higher pressures generated by the beating of the heart. The walls of capillaries, whose function is to exchange substances between the blood and surrounding tissue, consist solely of a thin endothelium with its basement membrane, thus permitting easy diffusion of blood solutes.
This animation illustrates the human respiratory system in an unprecedented way. Let's do this fantastic journey together. Not only oxygen, which is important for us, is part of the air we breathe. Water also enters our respiratory system, as well as other gases like krypton, or even radioactive radon. In addition, small and large particles are part of the air, which shouldn't enter our lower respiratory tract. For this reason, the upper airways provide certain protective mechanisms. Large dirt particles or insects are stopped in the nasal cavity by our nasal hair. Small particles are trapped by the nasal mucosa. Ciliated cells are located on the nasal mucosa. These cilia move in a wave-like manner. This allows the cilia to push the nasal mucus produced by the goblet cells towards the pharynx. Consequently, small particles that have been caught by the nasal mucus are swallowed. This process is called mucociliary clearance. Furthermore, the upper airways, such as the nasal and oral cavities, warm and moisten inspired air. During the act of swallowing, the epiglottis, which is connected to the tongue, ensures that no food or liquid can enter the lower respiratory tract. To do this, the epiglottis closes the larynx during swallowing, so that the bolus slides into the esophagus. The trachea, right below the larynx, is surrounded by incomplete rings of hyaline cartilage for reinforcement. Near the heart, the trachea branches into 2 main bronchi. The main bronchi lead to the left and right lungs. The left lung has only 2 lobes, upper and lower, whereas the right lung has 3 lobes. The centrally located heart pumps deoxygenated blood to the lungs through the pulmonary arteries. Oxygenated blood returns to the heart through the pulmonary veins and eventually to all organs. The main bronchi form the trunks for the bronchial tree. Like the branches of a tree, The tubular system of the lung starts here, into finer and finer branches. The right lung has 3 lobes with 10 lung segments. Each lung segment receives its own air and blood supply. The ends of the bronchial tree are tiny air sacs called alveoli. It is estimated that humans have 300 to 400 million alveoli. Large branches with cartilage are called bronchi. Thin branches at the end of a bronchial tree are called bronchioles. Instead of cartilage, bronchioles are surrounded by elastic fibers and smooth muscle. The exchange of gases occurs with the help of the alveoli. Individual alveoli are found on the walls of the bronchioli respiratory. Several alveoli are grouped together at the end of a bronchioli respiratory to form an alveolar sac, which is supplied by one alveolar duct. Alveoli are approximately 50 micrometers in size. They enlarge considerably during inhalation. Alveoli are largely composed of thin cells called type 1 pneumocytes. These cells are extremely thin, allowing oxygen and carbon dioxide to diffuse. Air, with the required oxygen, enters the alveoli via the alveolar duct. This is where gas exchange begins. All alveoli are covered with a network of thin blood vessels. Deoxygenated blood can thus be enriched with oxygen and at the same time release unneeded carbon dioxide into the alveoli. This is done with the help of red blood cells, the erythrocytes. Erythrocytes move through the blood vessels and take up the oxygen, shown here in blue. Iron, Fe, in these blood cells is responsible for binding the oxygen. An iron ion can bind to one oxygen molecule so that the oxygen can be transported. At the same time, the carbon dioxide in the bloodstream and emitted by red blood cells diffuses into the alveoli. This is made possible by diffusion. In the alveoli, we see a lot of oxygen, whereas in the blood vessels, there is a lot of carbon dioxide. This difference in concentration is eventually balanced by diffusion. This is how the differences in concentration are equalized. Let's now look at how air, and therefore oxygen, is transported into our lungs. Our body has various muscles that inflate and deflate the lungs. The muscles of the neck are responsible for fixing and raising the sternum and upper ribs, and certain muscles between the ribs raise and lower all the other ribs. However, the most important muscle of respiration is not found in the neck or chest area, but near the abdomen. The thoracic diaphragm, or simply diaphragm, is responsible for most of the work of breathing. First, let's take a closer look at chest breathing through the neck and rib muscles. Due to their arrangement and the contraction of the rib muscles, the ribs rotate outward. This causes an increase in volume, particularly in the lower regions, that is, the caudal ribs. The rib movement can be imagined similar to the handle of a bucket. The handle is shown here in red. Therefore, it is called bucket handle motion. increase in chest volume occurs not only laterally, but also sagittally. The sternum rotates as well, as seen here. This is called pump handle motion, because the movement of the sternum can be thought of as the motion of a pump handle. Thus, one can easily visualize the increase and decrease in volume of the lungs. When the lungs inflate, a negative pressure is created in the lungs and we breathe in. When the lungs deflate, positive pressure is created and air is forced out of our lungs. We breathe out. Inhalation, exhalation. Inhalation, exhalation. Here we can see the inhalation and exhalation process from below. As noted earlier, in addition to chest breathing, we can use diaphragmatic breathing. It can be performed separately or in cooperation with chest breathing. Diaphragmatic breathing is the natural way of breathing at rest. During diaphragmatic breathing, the diaphragm rises and lowers. When it rises, we exhale. When it lowers, we breathe in. In order for the lungs to inflate and deflate, the body has a pleura. The pleura serves as a lube outside of the lungs to allow for up and down motions against the chest wall. For this reason, the inner pleura covers the lungs. The outer pleura lines the rib cage and diaphragm. This allows the inner pleura to shift against the outer pleura. Between these two layers is the pleural cavity, shown here in yellow.
The human digestive system is very complex and has evolved over millions of years. It basically consists of the rectum, the large intestine, the small intestine, the pancreas, the stomach, also called gaster and ventriculus, and the liver with the gallbladder. The esophagus is also part of this system, as well as various salivary glands near the mouth. First, the food is broken up in the mouth by the teeth and then mixed with saliva with the help of the salivary glands. Saliva contains a digestive enzyme called amylase that already begins to digest carbohydrates in the mouth. It splits carbohydrates into smaller units. The ball-like mixture of food with saliva, also known as bolus, is pushed into the throat by the tongue, and finally into the esophagus, which propels the bolus to the stomach. The esophageal lumen, that is, the opening inside the esophagus, is very flexible, which allows boluses of different sizes to be transported. The esophagus consists of several layers. These layers occur throughout the entire digestive tract. The two outer muscle layers are responsible for peristalsis. Through these two muscles, the bolus can be transported from the mouth to the stomach, even if the person is standing on his head. The stomach is often divided into 6 areas. The stomach is composed of a similar structure to the esophagus. It has a longitudinal muscle layer on the outside. Underneath, we can find circular muscle fibers. In addition to this, there is an oblique muscle layer overlaying the mucosa. On the inside, there are rugae that allow the stomach to enlarge when food is consumed. The stomach wall contains gastric glands. They produce mucus, which is able to protect the stomach wall from the secreted gastric acid. Gastric acid is produced by simply smelling or seeing food, but also spices, and the stretching of the stomach causes the secretion, that is, the release of gastric acid. About 1 to 2 liters of gastric juice are produced per day. Since the esophagus does not have a protective mucus layer like the stomach and esophagus are separated by a sphincter. It relaxes when a bolus is pushed from the esophagus into the stomach and then contracts to prevent acid and food from going back up. Gastric juice consists, among other things, of hydrochloric acid, the enzyme pepsin, the intrinsic factor, and lipase for the digestion of fat. In addition to nutrients, food also contains bacteria that can damage the body. The components of hydrochloric acid are able to destroy harmful bacteria. In addition, hydrochloric acid converts pepsinogen, also released by the gastric glands, into pepsin. Pepsin is able to break down proteins in the stomach. For vitamin B12 absorption in the small intestine, the intrinsic factor is needed, which is produced by the gastric glands. The vitamin must combine with intrinsic factor, then it can be absorbed later by the small intestine. Vitamin B12 helps keep the body's nerve and blood cells healthy and helps make DNA. It also contains gastric lipase, an acid-resistant enzyme for fat digestion. In the stomach, gastric lipase splits a triglyceride into a free fatty acid and a diglyceride, whereby only the free fatty acid can be absorbed by the body. More effective fat digestion takes place in the small intestine. Through gastric juice and stomach movements, which take place approximately every 20 seconds, the individual boluses are mixed to a semi-fluid mass of partly digested food, the so-called chyme. The chyme cannot enter the duodenum at first because there is a sphincter at the stomach exit. The pyloric sphincter resembles the esophageal sphincter. The pyloric sphincter opens only a few millimeters, so that larger pieces remain inside the stomach. In the first section of the small intestine, the duodenum, bile, and pancreatic secretions are mixed with the chyme via the ampulla of Vater. Pancreatic juice contains numerous digestive proenzymes and enzymes. In order for these to do their job, a higher pH value than that in the stomach is necessary. For this reason, pancreatic juice contains sodium hydrogen carbonate. Hydrogen carbonate is able to neutralize the acid in the chyme and thus produce the optimum pH value of 7 or 8.
बुझे लगे छी हाँ अरे बुझे ना कौन अभी चलते ला डाइजेस्ट सिस्टम में कौन प्रोसेस में लगी स्टोमक में एंजाइम कोडी गला कोडी प्रोसेस ठीक से बुझा बोले
Contains sodium hydrogen carbonate. Hydrogen carbonate is able to neutralize the acid in the chyme and thus produce the optimal pH value of 7 or 8. Pancreatic juice also contains proenzymes. It is only through enterokinase, released by the duodenum wall, that the proenzyme trypsinogen becomes trypsin, which can split proteins and activate other trypsinogens. We also find alpha amylase, which we had already found in the mouth. It now does the rest regarding the splitting of carbohydrates, which it converts into maltose and isomaltose. Furthermore, pancreatic lipase is able to split triglycerides into 2 free fatty acids. The gastric lipase, as we have seen before, can produce only 1 free fatty acid. The pancreatic lipase can cleave triglycerides excellently because the bile breaks the fats down into tiny droplets. This is called emulsification. Numerous other enzymes are part of pancreatic juice, but these will not be explained in detail here. Bile is produced by the liver cells and transported to the gallbladder. The bile is stored in the gallbladder and finally added to the food in the duodenum via the ampulla of Vater. The pancreas also releases juice via the ampulla of Vater. The small intestine consists of 3 sections: duodenum, jejunum, and ileum. The ileum continues into the large intestine in the right lower abdomen. The duodenum and the jejunum have circular folds to increase the contact surface with the food. These circular folds extend about 1 centimeter into the lumen of the small intestine. These folds are covered with small finger-like projections called villi. Villi increase the surface considerably. Villi are about 1 millimeter long. Each villus contains blood capillaries and a lymphatic capillary called lacteal, which we will see later. The nutrients, marked green here, are absorbed by the villus and transferred to the blood capillaries. Some nutrients, such as glucose, do not require a carrier. They are transported freely in the bloodstream. Other nutrients, such as iron, require transport proteins like transferrin. Fats are transported. The triglycerides to be transported are virtually enclosed in the lipoprotein. Chylomicrons and triglycerides are then transported through the lacteal of the villus. Each villus is covered by even smaller microvilli. They multiply the intestinal surface considerably. The microvilli absorb nutrients and transport them to the inside. The last part of the small intestine is the ileum. It does not have, unlike the duodenum and jejunum, circular folds. The ileum absorbs electrolytes, such as calcium, for building bones, hair, and teeth. Trace elements, such as zinc, for sperm production and the immune system. Vitamins, such as B12, for the formation and maturation of red blood cells. And remaining bile acid, which is transported back to the liver via the bloodstream. As with the esophagus, the food is transported by peristalsis. In contrast, segmentation contractions serve to mix the chyme, which is shown here in yellow and red, to make it easier to see the mixing process. The large intestine is thicker than the small intestine. It is about 1 meter long and surrounds the small intestine. The small intestine is connected to the large intestine via the Bowheen's valve. It opens when chyme is to pass from the small intestine to the large intestine. The large intestine does not have any villi like the small intestine because most digestible substances have already been absorbed in the small intestine. However, the large intestine has an estimated 100 billion bacteria inside. They are important for many other tasks, such as the production of vitamins and the decomposition of fiber for the body's energy production. Many of these bacteria are an important part of the immune system by killing harmful germs. Through peristalsis, the chyme is transported from the ascending colon to the transverse colon to the descending colon. On its way through the large intestine, water is removed from the chyme. Furthermore, mucus is added for proper excretion of waste. Substances that cannot be absorbed through the small intestine or the large intestine remain in the rectum and are finally excreted through the anus.
हेलो फ्रेंड, वेलकम टू एसएससी कैंपस। दोस्तों, आज की इस वीडियो में हम नर्वस सिस्टम के बारे में स्टडी करेंगे।
क्लियर ऑल पार्टी ବୁଝିହେଲା ଏବେ ଲାଇଭ୍ ବନ୍ଦ କରିବ।